We aim to showcase our school's future-oriented vision for learning. In each episode, we're going to link up in thought partnership with our own students, our teachers, leading schools, movements, and educational leaders from around the world that inspire, invigorate, and inform our international school practice.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another BFIS episode that focuses on all the amazing things happening at our school. I'm Lila Jorge, the Associate Head of School, and I'm excited about today's podcast because inherently it is about the richness of diversity and inclusion at our school. Our vision for learning addresses the individual potential of students who are not first language speakers of English. We set out to critically analyze the school's English language acquisition program, and in the process ended up changing the term EAL, meaning English as an additional language, to a term which we found better described our students, which was BMLs, Bilingual and Multilingual Learners. Our students and staff have all kinds of language profiles. And today, I'm delighted to be joined by Liz Mahaffey, Head of our Whole School Support Services, and Erika Johnson, K-12 instructional coach and an English language acquisition teacher, to talk about BMLs. Today will be fun because both Liz and Erika will interview me, as I will also interview them. We will go down a journey where we study the BFIS past, analyze the present, and dream big about our future.
Hey y'all, this is Liz.
Hi everyone, this is Erika. We're so happy to be with you today to talk about BMLs.
So Lila, our first question for you is, why did the school decide to focus on the BML program here at BFIS?
Yeah, it was a journey that we went on. The whole school support team came together with our leadership team as well to kind of come to this understanding that we all had to be on the same page for how we maximize the potential of our BMLs. So what we did was we reviewed our philosophy, we determined next steps, and what we realized is that we wanted to ensure that we were engaging our culturally and linguistically diverse community in pursuit of educational excellence for all students. And I'm building that off of our mission statement because truly that's where the drive came from. And from that, we also recognized that we wanted it to be research-based, that we would all have a common language for how we approach our work to building our BML community.
Thank you. We also know that the school partnered with Francesca McGeary and her team at the Center of Educators of BMLs. And there are a lot of folks out there in this space globally. So how did you come to choose Francesca?
So what we did was we actually did quite a bit of research. We interviewed a number of providers to see if they were able to meet our needs, but also understand our context as an international school, because there are many providers that work with schools in the US or with other places, but we needed to ensure that the folks that worked with our school knew who our population was. From that, we also then had John Kernis, who's our secondary head of section, and he had also partnered with the Center for Educators of BMLs, who is led by Francesca McGeary at his former school in Singapore. And he raved about the way it had transformed and really led their community on this journey of a mindfulness for how we teach BMLs. Additionally, I think there's a couple of other things that made us think about that helped us to make this decision is that the Center for Educators of BMLs use a 5-tier system that develops a unique BML program. They first analyze specific content and culture of our school. They then develop a specific model to address our school goals and the unique needs of our students. The third step then involves teacher learning and using the program curriculum. And finally, it's really about this ongoing partnership where they continue to support us throughout our journey.
Okay, so when you plan to kick off this work with staff and students, you were super intentional. And sometimes people don't know exactly what it is that we do on professional development days or our 3 to 5 time on Wednesday afternoons. So can you explain to our listeners how you got us started and planned and used our professional learning sessions, and then also how you got folks invested in this as something super important for the students in our care?
Wow, great question. Super loaded. All right, let's go for this. With professional learning, I think it's important for our community to know that we have what's called PACT, which takes place every Wednesday from 3:15 to 5 o'clock. And it is our time that is really valuable for our whole community to come together. And it's titled PACT because it's professional and collaborative time. And this is a place where we're able to learn as a community and grow as a community. What we did to prepare for this is the year before, we actually had a survey go out where we asked our students the many languages that they spoke, the languages that they considered their first language, but also just how they identified. And I think that information was pertinent because we didn't have it prior. Additionally, we came together as a whole school support team and we actually audited ourselves and said, what are we doing well? What are we doing that needs to be stretched or developed? What are opportunities and what are threats? So we did do an analysis. I think what we didn't do is then share that analysis and that work with our community. However, so that's important information to note for future work when we're considering new initiatives, to take all the work that we've done and share it with the community so that there's greater understanding as to the steps that we're taking. I think the other piece that's really important is we had provided teachers with time to get this BML certification. So 85% of our teachers are certified now to teach BML students. What we engaged in was getting our teachers certified, and they were participated in an 8-week course where they used this PAC time, and it was virtual and self-paced, but it was within our community where teachers were responding to practices that they had in their own classes, which I think was great because our teachers were able to kind of see what was happening in other folks' classrooms as they were learning. Staff also, there were many staff members that chose to collaborate with each other in certain portions. So I think the BML certification process, although it felt heavy at times for teachers, I also think it provided opportunities for teachers to partner in ways that they hadn't. So BFIS can now proudly say that we're one of 3 BML smart schools in all of Europe. This means that we are one of the few schools that are committed to developing and nurturing and nourishing a BML community.
I'd also love to add to that, as a new staff member, the whole school professional development day that we all engaged in as teachers in November was our kickoff for the BML certification program. And one of the things that I really enjoyed about that day was that we brought in a panel of students, parents, and staff members who are bilingual and multilingual, and we were able to hear their stories. And it really humanized this experience for so many of us, especially those who are monolingual and have not experienced what it feels like to learn another language and to struggle through that process. And I really think it helped bring a lot of perspective and empathy to our staff.
What have the staff been doing differently this semester to enhance their instruction and relationships to support BMLs?
Well, as we talked about and Erika just shared about our kickoff day in November, as a school we picked 5 initiatives that would intentionally shape the culture of our school. So the 5 strategies that we agreed to focus on include prior learning links, L1 student groupings, graded readers and text, table talk, and word work and vocabulary building.
So as a school, after finishing the BML certification course, we chose 5 different strategies that we wanted teachers to focus on for the remainder of the year. And within these 5 strategies, we chose prior learning links, which is tapping into background information, L1 student groupings, L1 meaning first language groupings of students, so that they can speak the same language with their peers in order to develop better understanding of a context or content area, graded or leveled readers and texts, table talk, which is students engaging in real conversations with each other, and vocabulary building and word work. And we wanted teachers to choose 3 of these 5 strategies to focus on for the remainder of the year so that they could become not only more confident, but also consistent with these practices within their classrooms.
And then we know teachers are also offering additional support through individualized instructions. We have language specialists that come in and collaborate with the classroom teachers to ensure that there's academic success for all of our bilingual and multilingual learners. And then each week we do a Bravo BML where teachers can submit things that they're doing in their classrooms or that they see around the school that's being done to create more of a culturally inclusive classroom environment.
And it's been really wonderful to celebrate all of these different practices that are happening around the school. We've had teachers who have sent emails that are now bilingual. We have students who are reading in their first language to their classmates who don't even speak that language, but then are learning new vocabulary words. And so there's just more engagement across the community with all of these different languages and cultures that are such a special part of our BFIS community.
How exciting. What impact do you think that might have on students? Are you feeling...
Well, one of the things, we just came from watching the second grade
Survivor Unit exhibition.
And as they were handing out papers that the students had made, the information was in English and Spanish, but one of their parents only speaks Chinese, so they had one made for that parent as well. So the students, I think, are even being
I love it.
conscious.
And it's also, I think, been a point of discussion with our staff, too, and the staff members feeling like their cultures and languages are being valued more. I know that's something that's been talked about in lots of different capacities just within the 6 months that Liz and I have both been at the school, and wanting to really lift up Catalan, especially knowing that that is such an integral part of Barcelona and the culture that we are a part of. And it feels like that is also being put in the spotlight much more now. And that feels really great for so many of our community members.
What's powerful about what I'm hearing, though, is even as the DSL, the Designated Safety Lead, what I'm hearing is that this also provides safety for everyone. So I appreciate you sharing that. So there are many myths around language learning. What myths are out there, and how do you bust them?
So one of the biggest myths that we have had discussions around over the past several months was how time spent learning in their first language would take away from the valuable time needed to learn an additional language, an L2 or an L3. And that actually isn't true. Learning through and maintaining a first language is integral to learning other languages. And the reason being is that the more that you learn in your first language, the more background knowledge and information you have to connect with another language. And so as you're learning a second language, you want to continue building up that first language so that there's more crossover between the two and that there's more connections that can be made. And this is actually called additive bilingualism, when you're building up both of these languages or more languages than just two, because when you're literate in one, that's going to transfer over into literacy in another. And so you're helping to continue to build both simultaneously.
What's powerful about what you're saying is when I was growing up in the 70s, 80s, oftentimes immigrant families that went to the U.S. oftentimes made their children speak only in English. And a lot of children that I grew up with lost their first language, and it's a shame. And now that I'm hearing you say about like the power of maintaining it and its impact on acquiring a second language, it's really powerful.
It is. And myself, like being a bilingual speaker with French and English, I know that if I didn't have the level of English when I started learning French, it would have been really challenging to know how to transfer over vocabulary and concepts. And even when I didn't fully understand a topic in French initially, I could figure out connections with the English contextually, which helped to build that language even further. And so we really want to make sure that we're continuing to support our students' L1s at home and outside of school as they're building their L2s and their L3s.
So that's really important for parents and guardians and caregivers to know that it's crucial for them to ensure that that maintenance is still happening at home so that that can even build their stronger English foundation.
Absolutely. Reading at home, watching videos, having conversations about their school day, even if the school day was in English for a student and they speak a different language at home, having the student be able to translate that information and knowledge from English into another language is helping to build up that language, and it's helping also to keep families engaged in what's happening in the school day.
I would say another myth that's out there is that academic language develops at the same rate as social language. What we know is that conversational and social language typically develop within the first 1 to 2 years, but academic language usually takes 5+ years to develop.
Oh, that's really interesting too, and I'm sure for parents and caregivers that must be like, oh wow. It does take time, so they need to build that social playground language for kids to be able to then build on the academic.
Yes, for sure.
And I think another part of this too that we have to keep in mind is because that social language develops at a much faster rate than academic language, it can be easy to label somebody as proficient or fluent in a language just by hearing them talk with their friends or in social settings. But we know as professionals that these students still need academic support with their language development far past the amount of time that they have socially created their language, because academic language takes so much longer.
So what advice do you have for parents when they think that their kids are fully proficient?
That's a really great question. I think being able to talk to them about the academic concepts that they're learning about in school to see if they're able to access the vocabulary, the terminology that's related with that is one way. And also reinforcing that the differences in amount of time it takes to acquire a language is really important for the older children to know, especially in secondary school, that it might feel like you're proficient, but there are going to still be areas that you're not comfortable with in your L2 or L3 because you haven't had the exposure yet, which again relates back to continuing to develop your L1, because when you have understanding, let's say in physics in your L1 and you're learning about that in English, which is your L2 or L3, you have that bridge already to connect those two, versus if you're only learning about physics in English and you've never been exposed to that in another language, it's a lot harder to develop that academic
that makes sense.
language.
I would say another big myth that came out as we were doing, surveys and research with staff and parents and things is that many people believe children can learn languages far easier than adults can learn.
They can?
This is one of my favorite myths. And I learned about this when I was getting my master's, actually, in teaching culturally, linguistically, and diverse learners, because we as adults believe that children can just do things so much easier than us. And research actually shows that the only thing children can do better than adults with language is the accent before the age of 8, because their palate and their mouth isn't fully formed. So they're able to make sounds that we maybe don't have in our first languages. Otherwise, there's no difference with acquiring another language based off of age. The only thing that really is different is the amount of time you can prioritize to learning another language. As a child, your full-time job is to go to school, to learn, and you're being fully immersed in these areas that language is going to be practiced regularly. Whereas an adult, you have so many other priorities and things that you're balancing in life that it's just harder to find the time and sometimes the motivation to learn these things. Also, the older you get, the more developed your language becomes, right? So there's a lot more you have to learn in order to feel proficient and fluent in something. Whereas children have a lot less to learn and they can sound more fluent or proficient at a much younger age because they have less vocabulary.
This is fascinating. I am going to start learning, Russian, Chinese, knowing that
Erika's very passionate about this one. We preach about this all the time for people.
Thanks for sharing that. I've heard you mention at other times that BMLs is like having a superpower. What are the advantages of being a multilingual learner?
Well, we have learned and we continue to see that there's growing research that our multilingual learners can develop higher creativity, have greater strengths in problem solving, and they have greater flexibility and control over their decision making. Coming from a support services, that means that a lot of times their executive functioning skills are much higher, and that's really a strength for these students.
Another one too is that learning more languages can come more easily after you learn your first additional language. And part of that relates back to this Stephen Krashen's effective filter hypothesis, which is one of my favorite kind of theories that go along with language development. But Stephen Krashen believes that there are 3 different pieces or components that could impact language development: motivation, self-confidence, and anxiety levels. And ideally, you want your motivation and self-confidence to be high and your anxiety to be low. But at times throughout the language development process, we see that there's maybe low motivation or low self-confidence and really high anxiety, which actually blocks any sort of language development. But usually once somebody has learned another language already, those levels stay where they need to, like high motivation and self-confidence, low anxiety, as they progress through other languages, because they've already been through this process of struggle, right? And so it really is a superpower in the sense of they can not only learn other languages, but they're able to then adapt and take perspective on so many other cultures and peoples because of this ability to connect with other languages.
But there's a skill set too that goes beyond just the learning of language that I'm hearing you say. It's a transference of a skill of saying like, oh, I was able to get through this challenge. Now I can do this with other things. And it's that muscle memory that gets developed, which I think is fascinating to hear about.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I think within that too, they also have a sense of empathy, which is something, you can't always teach that. But just being in classrooms and watching kids interact with one another and them reaching out and just seeing that empathetic nature that these kids have.
And I'm sure they're embedding other skills that, like they might have to use TPR, which is total physical response, where they might have to use their hands to help them communicate. It also makes them be patient because they may have to wait while a child is looking to retrieve vocabulary. So they'll wait and give that child an opportunity to answer. What about our wider staff and parent community? What initiatives are going on?
Well, we now have a BML team, which consists of leadership, some elementary and secondary EAL and support teachers. Erika is on here as our school-wide instructional coach. And so we've taken all the information from the courses. We've taken the plan, the strategic plan. We've taken everything, and now we are working on a 3-year action plan for the school.
And within this 3-year action plan, we are working with different aspects within our school community, like admissions, specifically our language policy, looking at how teachers are incorporating the different strategies that we've learned about in our BML coursework, to really make sure that we are focusing on how best to support our bilingual and multilingual learners at school. They're such an integral part to our community, and the diversity that they bring is what we love so much about BFIS. And so we want to make sure that the steps we take are really intentional and making sure that they're being as supportive to our BMLs.
And I would say we really want parents involved. Right. We did a Talk Tuesday. It was sparsely attended, so that's why we want parents to realize how important they are to this. That's why we jumped at the idea of this podcast so we could get information out to families and communities and explain like the important work that's going on that maybe people don't realize what all has been happening.
And how they can continue to also support our students through this process, similar to how we're supporting them within the classroom.
It's a partnership, right? In order for us to really build their children up, there needs to be that work also taking place at home.
Well, and I think that kind of leads to like, what are some things maybe that parents have been asking, how can we support this work at home? When we were working on our action plan, we came across a quote that says, to learn another language, first nurture your own. So that's one of the things, is to continue to work on that language by going through vocabulary words that kids are learning at school and having them explain it in their first language.
Continuing to read each night and then talking about what you're reading with your child in their first language too is such another integral part to building language development.
I want to harp on what you just said about the reading. I think reading is essential not only does it provide opportunities for parents to bond and nurture their child, but it's also a place where they can talk about language and the beauty of language and play with language as they read with their child. So I'm glad you talked about that and mentioned it. I know you have an action plan to continue to lift strategic goals and action steps in this area. What gets you excited about where we might be down the road in our bilingual, multilingual learner journey?
I mean, there is a lot, and we've been, working on this, so we probably are more passionate even than other people in the community may be. But for us, knowing that this is not just a 1-year fix, this is going to be a 3 to 5 year plan that we're going to continue to revisit and work on and improve.
And I think for me too, it's this idea that the work is never ending. We are truly embedding these practices into our daily routines, and we want them to be really a part of who we are as this community. So even after the action plan gets checked off and completed, the hope is that the steps that we're taking are really embedded into our daily practices.
And I would say we're excited about engaging like the larger BFIS community, that it's not just our staff trying to do this work, but that parents are excited about it, students are excited about it, and that everyone realize we're partnering to develop this, our bilingual and multilingual learners.
Yeah, and I think for me, the last part of that too is knowing that bilingual and multilingual learners isn't just about language. There are so many other components to this that we want to be building up and embracing throughout this process, like culture, and knowing that there are so many other ways that we can celebrate and lift up this community, and that's something that we really want to be doing moving forward.
Yeah, it's this idea of diversity and inclusion, right? And we are a part of something much greater than ourselves, and being able to kind of celebrate and honor all those people that make our community up is powerful. Like that is the work that we need to be doing. So I thank you for today's episode. It's been a pleasure having this conversation with the two of you.
Thank you.
We're really happy to be here.